Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Top Cyber Pro podcast. Almost had a slip of the tongue there. But welcome to the Top Cyber Pro podcast. I'm founder and CEO Jim West, and we have a great guest today that's going to talk a lot about threats, analysis, malware analysis, and all the things that it entails. Because this guy's got like 2+ decades in this part of the industry, and he's phenomenal. So without any further ado, I'm introducing Ryan Chapman.
Hello, hello. Thank you for having me on. Excited to be here.
Well, Ryan, there's so much that we could talk for hours, and I'm saying that at the beginning of the recording, not even towards the end, because we literally could talk for hours. Because not only do you wear a lot of hats and titles and experiences you've had in industry so far, you've also literally wrote the book on forensics, at least digital forensics. I think it was called the 4528 course for SANS, which you are an instructor as well for SANS. So, of everything else that Ryan does, he's also an instructor. And like I said, he literally wrote the book on this stuff. So, folks, you're in for a treat to get some perspectives and insights on this. So, let's start with one of the top titles that's along all the various hats that you wear, Threat Hunter, because that sounds very riveting and exciting. But I guess to kind of temper the visual, when people think of someone hunting, like a guy with a rifle and a scope and tracking tracks through the woods and so forth, that's the usual visual when we think of a hunter. But can you give us more of what the reality is in the context of threat hunting?
Yes, so for my day job, I work as a team lead for a managed threat hunting group. So we have a number of clients, and for them, we look for the things that people, processes, and or systems and whatever else either don't find or like they just don't alert on, or things that essentially folks or tooling might not necessarily correlate to anomalous or malicious.
Hmm.
So one of the good examples of what we do is we stay abreast of the ever-changing landscape that is cyber intel, infosec, whatever you want to call it, and implement as quickly as possible detections for all the dirty new things. We work with product teams to ensure that the product will, as soon as possible, detect them, but our overall charge is to be literally like at the front of the charge, if you will,
Yes.
the opening salvo of the battle against these, whether it's a new actor, an evolved malware specimen or family, a brand new malware specimen, new, whatever it might be. We want to be in the front lines. And
Yes.
so it's constantly researching, it is constantly working with others, it is constantly intel sharing, and it's awesome because it's constant change. There's always
Yes.
something new, something novel, some fun thing to look at. And we like to think of ourselves just as you described, by the way. We're out in the safari, we've got our
In
guns
the wild.
slung over our backs, and we're out there hunting for the bad.
So to kind of give some context for anyone watching this, you're trying to wrap your head around, well, I have this product, I get automatic updates, my browser extensions get updated. Updates are happening every day and every week. So we're updating. Why do we need threat hunting teams like this in the industry? Well, if you ever heard about a race condition, which is when, the time of vulnerability is discovered and then the time it's patched. Well, there's that is a major component of time, but there's also the time before it's even discovered, and there's still a gap between when that vulnerability has always been there. The discovery is where it becomes public knowledge, and then the rest of the exploit community starts to go after it. But that is a gap of time that no one talks about because we get trained on the race condition part, which makes sense in our world. The day it's discovered and published, and then the day the patch is available, that's what we usually focus on in the people, operations, and systems that he referred to earlier. We usually focuses on trying to bridge that gap. But there's the gap that exists in the question mark where we don't know what we don't know yet, and that's what teams like this focus on. And that's why I'm super excited to talk to Ryan today because not only does he lead a team of threat hunters, he leads it for one of the top businesses in this space. So, with threat hunting, can you just take us through like what a typical day in the life would be like when you come into the office, you got your team there. What is kind of like the rough big blocks in the day of the life of a threat hunter? Because you did mention
Yeah,
research.
so
Yes.
yes. So one of the things, of course, is, as I call staying abreast of the threat intel landscape. So one of the funniest things to me is I have a number of people who will ask, how do you stay on top of all this? There's too much, right? It's just too much. And my hilarious to me, I think it's hilarious, but it's true. Answers is social media.
Yep.
Basically, whether you're on Blue Sky or X/Twitter, I still call it Twitter, or whether it's LinkedIn, or whatever it is, You have, and then also the darknet forums, the dark web forums,
Hmm.
where the threat actors are, selling new access that they have, leasing out new malware as a service tooling, and that type of intel. Wherever you're gathering these things from, I find that the more people are involved in the dissemination of that information, and the more that you're involved with them, and absorbing that, and via social media is just great. The threat actors love to brag about their stuff. Researchers love to brag about their work, and rightfully so. And at the same time, threat intel researchers, when we find something and we're like, wait, what's that? Right? We like to share that. Now,
Yes.
many times we'll share it in more privatized circles initially to, we don't want necessarily the threat actors to know immediately, oh, we're on to you. Well, we don't want to do that. But overall, social media like Twitter and LinkedIn serve as a great resource because people share the articles that they publish.
Hmm.
At their day job, they might identify some brand new threat and they might be publishing a blog article on it. And it typically takes a bit to get those published. It's not like most organizations can market immediately, like, oh, here's my blog post, done. Like, doesn't work that way.
Hmm.
So as soon as those get out, they want to talk about them. They want to brag about them. They want to get feedback on their research and their findings and things like that. So it really helps to stay on top of those types of information sources. But we basically gather as much intel as we can on a daily basis. Whether you have your RSS feeds, like kind of old school, whether you're in, I'm in a number of Slack and Discord groups where we basically share intel with each other, or for that matter, you just share articles that we found interesting that were, recently published kind of things. And once we identify that there's a threat that looks interesting to us, then, a threat hunter, our job is to try to detect that thing within whatever environment or environments we're in charge of, or to which we have access, right? The onus falls to us to protect.
Hmm.
So in my case, I work, at my day job for a large organization, and we have a particular client-based product, I mean, that we have clients for, right? They pay for the product. And so our visibility is heavily dependent on that. And within your organization, whoever you are watching this at whatever point, you might have say like, oh, well, my visibility is limited because of blah, blah, blah. We only have a vanilla Windows rollout. We've enabled some additional logging, maybe PowerShell uh, script logging, or module loading logging, or even transaction logging. But we don't have a lot of visibility. Or you could be the exact opposite, and you could be like, look, we have Sysmon installed as a backup. We have a massive EDR. We have SaaS utilities that all have CAS behind them. Essentially, we have all these different toolings and visibility. And on the network side, we have wonderful next gen firewalls, and we have PCAP, and we have Zeek deployed, whatever it is. It's all about identifying, well, first off, truly understanding what your visibility is and what it's not. That's very, very important.
Hmm.
But utilizing that knowledge to determine, okay, this is a threat. These are the actions that are carried out. How can I, using the telemetry available to me, potentially identify that activity? A lot of that comes through testing. So you may have a number of malware lab environments where not just a malware lab, like, oh, I run the malware and then I analyze the malware in a debugger, right? But rather something that is specific to the type of detections and tooling that you have that provide your general telemetry that are running when that sucker runs.
Hmm.
Is it picked up immediately? Oh, awesome, right? We already either have a signature for it, or one of our, what do you want to just call it, AI based or ML based or whatever you have in your environment, picked it up based off heuristics or based off of, user behavior analysis, whatever. But let's just say it doesn't get picked up and it executes. Okay, well, what is it doing? And in order to answer the true what is it doing, it's typically like a worldwide kind of, well, we notice that process wise, you have these parent processes that spawn these child processes with these command lines. They create these mutexes or mutual exclusions, etc. You might have another group that says, oh, well, we've got a fully PCAP SSL decrypted environment, and we noticed on the network side that it does all of this. If you have the ability to do all that level of analysis yourself, that's great. But by and large, most folks do not. Most organizations do not. They have to come to an organization like the one that I work for. But
Yeah.
usually, and we're like, well, did you guys analyze it? And we have many teams that do. So overall, the idea is for whoever's watching this, identify and truly understand your telemetry. Can you see process executions? Can you see the command lines associated with those? Can you see what files are written or I should say created or written to, or a file handle is opened to, like all those things. Understand what you're able to see and then how that relates to that threat. And then if you have the ability to use an EDR, an XDR, or if you have logs in a log aggregator or a SIM, maybe you have Elastic or you have Splunk or you have, whatever, right? Then utilizing your telemetry and understanding, okay, I should be able to detect this because when it executes, it launches, say, chrome.exe. And when it does so, the command line will include a parameter for a debug option and set a debug port. So what we as threat hunters do is go like, okay, well, this particular threat does A, B, and C, right? Let's just say it's just three things. And one of those happens to be that command line. So what launches Chrome in this particular attack chain? Oh, well, in this attack chain, it's actually based on the user. I'm just making something up here, right?
Yeah.
Actually, this is from recent analysis, so I'm not really making it up, but I'm giving it a random example is what I really mean. So, oh, well, the user was phished, right? And in this real world example, the phishing link that they received takes them to cloud-based sharing site, something that is typically what we refer to as lots living off trusted sites. So it's not attacker infrastructure that they have spun up or otherwise compromised, but rather it's like Google Drive,
Mhm.
or an Azure Data Blob, or Box or Dropbox or whatever, something that we all like and enjoy at the global IT community, but being used for a little bit of silliness, right? There's a file there. They download that document. The document is, say, it's a Word document. It's weaponized with Visual Basic for application scripting, and that invokes an obfuscated PowerShell command. That then downloads a JS file, JavaScript file, which PowerShell then invokes using cscript.exe. And then once that runs, it downloads the actual malware, say it's a malware as a service or some more targeted malware, to a particular directory on the machine, maybe just the user's downloads by default, whatever it might be. And then that launches Chrome and provides the debug command line. Depending on your visibility, the kind of things that we look at is like, all right, what's the first step? What can we identify on the email security gateway side? And if you have those logs, awesome. If you're sitting there going, well, we don't have an email security gateway, we use some really random whatever email provider. You're like, all right, but hey, we use N365. Okay, great. Their threat intel team is freaking amazing, and they might have all kinds of detections already, or by the time you start getting into it. And then as you move further down the attack chain, when it actually hits the host from the perspective of the document, if Excel is using VBS to launch PowerShell, how exactly is it doing that? What is it invoking? What methods is it using? And how is PowerShell being invoked? What parameters are being provided to PowerShell? Can you hunt for those? Are they unique enough? If they're not, could we use that as like a parent process to then look for the next step in the chain and write whatever type of query language or search syntax or whatever you have, right? In order to say, okay, well, I want to look for, maybe you go down further in the chain. Eventually, you have this JavaScript file that's invoked via C script. So you say, okay, well, I want to look for when C script executes and it's executing runtime wise a JavaScript file. And that JavaScript file then reaches out to the network. And you can even integrate detections from the network side. What does it look like when it actually runs, right? A machine wise, whether it's malware analysis, malware dynamic analysis lab, or whatever. What do your products pick up and see? And then from there, oh, okay, well, it usually downloads and stores in a particular location. Let's say it's the C slash, colon slash, whatever it is, perf logs, the performance logs directory. Threat actors and ransomware actors love that darn directory. They love it. In general, you should have log files there. Most environments don't have any files there, but these threat actors love to drop EXEs, DLLs, scripts, things like that. A basic detection for hunters can be like, well, okay, let's look at, we have file write events or create events. Let's just look for any .exe, .dll, .vbs, .ps1, whatever, files that are written to that directory and just start there. And you run it enterprise wide, or if you're in charge of a multitude of enterprises, right, you run it against all of them and see what the results look like. Oh, we have 1 million results over 2 days with
Mhm.
half of our client base. Okay, you're gonna need to improve that, right? Or it might just immediately be like, oh yeah, that's not common at all. Zero hits. You're like, oh, okay, that's a detection right there. And then however you can set up your scheduled searches, correlation rules, whatever your particular tooling calls them, then that's step one. Actually, I think that was like step 10. I was just going off there, but you get the idea.
Yeah, yeah,
So we threat hunters are all about our telemetry and our capabilities with a managed services provider like I work for. Then, it's usually about what our product is seeing, 'cause that's what our clients have. But I worked for 5 years in incident response consulting. And when doing that, I learned about just a veritable cornucopia, a bevy of different services and SIMs and things like that. Like, yeah, if this case for this client, they use ArcSight. I remember the first time I got an ArcSight case. I had worked at one private company for 7 years, and excuse me, before moving into consulting, we didn't happen to use ArcSight. So when I was in IR consulting, one of my first cases was like, oh, the client uses ArcSight. They want you to do the analysis in ArcSight, and I was like, okay. And they said, do you know how to use ArcSight? And I was like, sure. Like they're all the same. Like, yeah, general use, like I'll learn how to use it. That's fine. And then just identifying, what telemetry is there and using that to your advantage. So the big thing is knowing what tooling you have available and understanding what telemetry that provides. And when you're looking through, whether it's threat intel articles, something that some large company, I was reading an article recently from Proofpoint, the email security provider. I call
yeah,
them an email security provider, but I'm sure they'd be like, we do a lot more than that, Ryan. Like, well,
yeah,
okay. And they had this great article. And so you're reading through that and going, my email security gateway generates logs. Those logs are not even in our SIM. So,
mm,
okay, how could I hunt for this? Well, I would have to go into that portal then. And then what's that query language look like? And what fields does it abstract? And how does it actually parse and, fill the actual values? And can I use that? In a perfect world, every single system that you have, every single system, whether it's security based or not, right, would feed logs into one unified environment. And that's what all the vendors are pushing for these days because, duh, you want a single pane of glass,
yeah,
as we call it. So the more logs you can get in, the better. But that's cute for me to say because I am not the one writing the checks for all
yeah.
that data storage or
Ingest.
licensing and whatnot. Yeah.
So, so Ryan, there's a lot that you covered there, and even when you was kind of going through some examples, you was breaking down, do this, then this, and this, and follow this process, and this call out to this directory. That's a lot of steps there. But just so people understand, the speed of which you can talk about it or think through a process, that's not the speed of which these things run, correct? So we're talking things that run at wire speed or as fast as your system can process a script or series of executables. It's like milliseconds. And so when you're going back and trying to do the analysis, it's very methodical and you have to kind of go down the rabbit hole step by step. Or if you're analyzing it in like a sandboxed environment, or there's other terms you can use for it. But when you're doing the analysis where you're seeing what it's doing in your perception of real time, it's still executing it super fast. That's why a lot of these things propagate and spread really, really fast.
Yeah, oh, big time. I had some coffee before this, and I think I just talked potentially too fast. But the overall concept of performing for, especially digital forensic analysis or investigations, right? We call the general realm the blue team, or we call it digital forensics and incident response, or we just refer to it as digital forensics or whatever. And the real concept here is when you have an incident, the amount of time it's going to take to analyze that incident. Obviously, it depends on how many full-time employees you can dedicate, right? How many FTEs will be on this and for what hours of the day and whatever. But a lot of times you might be doing analysis on a full disk image and you have to wait for that image to acquire. And then you have to, typically, you should verify it and then duplicate it and make sure that you have a backup catalog of that. And then you can start to try to parse it with whatever tool your team is going to use, be that a larger commercial tool like Axiom or Encase or FTK, or if it's going to be something like, oh, I'm going to run, Eric Zimmerman's cape tool against it, and it's going to extract a bunch of data from, the mounted image or something. So how long does it take to just parse it? When I first got into digital forensics, I was in an organization that was running Encase, and we were doing acquisitions across the wire. And we had projects in over 100 countries. It was a massive company. And we would literally just go and be like, okay, so we got this initial alert or this initial thread or whatever it was that got us looking that way.
Hmm.
Okay, let me load it in Encase. So I search the host name. It's like, boom, the agent is active. I'm like, yeah, let's analyze this now. And then I'd be like, parse the MFT. Let's do some analysis. And Encase would be like, hold on. And then you're sitting there for, an hour for the darn thing to parse. And then you just have all your raw data. So are you then going to run some Encase scripts against it? How long do they take to run? The general vibe when the bad thing occurs, when the veritable it hits the fan, is the executives, the board, the people who run the business, they want to return to a normal operating state, and they want to do so as fast as possible. And unfortunately, they typically learn very quickly that whatever team is doing the investigation, especially depending on how deep and low level the forensics
Hmm.
are going to be, you got the idea, that it takes time. And when you think about a ransomware event, right? As you mentioned earlier, and thank you, I'm the author of SANS Forensics 528, Ransomware and Cyber Extortion. And in that course, we basically cover the entire attack chain, what? Attack chain, better yet.
Freudian slip.
A check chain. I'm gonna use that from now on. And we talk about here's how they typically get initial access, and then here's how they typically will escalate privileges, and then here's how they typically will harvest credentials. And we kind of start at the beginning and go towards the end. But in reality, especially with ransomware cases, but in reality, by the time whatever team is going to be doing the response and doing the digital forensic analysis gets involved, they're going to see something typically. Now, the better your detections are, the earlier in the attack chain,
Hmm.
but typically they're going to see something a little more towards the end,
Yep.
right? They might see something like a ransomware note pops up on 1,000 computers or 20, bad enough, right? And you have the ransomware note. So now you have to find out, okay, well, what process created that note? What
Hmm.
is that process? Oh, it's a ransomware binary. Well, what process or user or whatever else wrote that file to disk? And how did they move it to that machine? Did they just download it via Chrome? Did they, was it a PowerShell script? Where'd the PowerShell script come from? You work your way backwards.
Hmm.
Oh, it came from a scheduled task that ran. How'd that get scheduled? A script ran. Where'd that come from? Oh, it was actually invoked via a local domain controller via
Now
RPC
you have
call or
something
something.
else
Okay,
big
well, so who's
compromised.
on
Yeah.
there? Yeah. And you're working backwards and backwards and
Backwards,
backwards.
backwards.
One of the last things you often will identify is the initial access vector, if you even do these days with ransomware. But one of the problems there is that because organizations want to return to a working state so badly, they want to know, okay, we will preserve the evidence, but we're going to either spin up brand new servers and recover from a backup, preserve this one, recover it from backup, and then as the incident responder or the, whatever your team is called, your role is then to say, yeah, hold on, you have backups for how long? And then the question they're going to have is, 2 weeks, or hopefully at least 2 to 4 weeks at least. And then they're like, which ones can we use to roll back? And your initial answer for potentially the initial X number of days or even weeks is, I
In
don't
some
know.
cases,
I don't know yet.
years.
I don't know when they got in.
Yeah.
I don't know how long they've been in here. What's their dwell time, as we call it? I don't know. So the overall issue that you run into is that you have the business team. I refer to them as the business incident response team, the executives, the folks who are working in public relations. Usually for ransomware cases, you'll have to invoke a PR team, internal or external, but you're probably going to need one. And they just want to up, let's go back to business. And typically you can't just tell them, well, if you have 2 weeks of backups, just use one from 2 weeks ago because you don't know if the threat actor was already in 2 weeks ago. And you might spend however many, I've heard of companies who spend weeks restoring from a ransomware event
Mhm.
only to not realize that the backups they've used to restore the threat actor already had persistence and they're
Yes.
just re-enabling access to the environment.
Well, Ryan, you bring up a couple
And that's a
good points
bad time.
about that. Because one, if you're whether you're going with the instant response steps of like SANS, because SANS is a well-respected organization that most of the industry follows their instant response. I believe it's 5, 6 steps, with lessons learned being the last. And there's other organizations that have their slight variations, but what they all have in common is this concept of, well, containment, where you have to contain the bad stuff, right? And then there's a very important step before you go, ideally before you go back into operations, is complete eradication. But what Ryan mentioned there is a lot of businesses, what if they're down, their sites are down, their operations are hampered, they can't exist and make money. And businesses are here to perform a service or sell a product of some kind to basically serve their board and stakeholders and stockholders to produce results that create revenue. And so that balance. So one of the greatest examples of public failures to do that eradication or give their team enough time to do their work was Sony. So PlayStation Network, back during a run of there was a plethora of SQL injection attacks run by multiple groups. The most popular one was LulzSec, because they kind of script kiddied the SQL injection across so many offices and even branches of government and so many governmental entities as well, mostly with website defamation. But there were other groups and what we call like nation state level actors that was also using the same vulnerabilities in their toolkits and their tactics, if you will. But Sony PlayStation Network suffered a hard down. They had to take the whole network offline. And of course, all the fans and the PlayStation community was like, we want to play our Call of Duty. We want to get back into gaming. And so they were just bleeding money. So they made a decision to put it back up. Well, I think it was like one day that it was down. They put it back up. And within few hours of being back up, they were again owned again because those artifacts still existed. And so therefore they had to take it down again to let their teams do the work. So Ryan is talking about a very challenging process and that kind of balance act where the business needs to exist and run and be up and online, but the team has to work through just mountains of raw data using various scripts and filters and trying to get down to the heart of what it is so they can eradicate it. And sometimes just because you go back to, the event date, that's not far enough. Like Ryan's talking about, so you have to go and look at how did this happen? How did that happen? And so you have these acronyms and concepts of like indicators of compromise, indicators of attack. And so, when Ryan's talking about after the fact, they're going like a fireman, like shifting through the ashes to try to find, oh, there's the oily rag that started this fire. But then there's the other proactive approach, which his team probably does a lot of day to day when they're not responding to something. Then they're actually proactively looking for those indicators of attack or a tactic or technique that's been seen once in a while and somebody in the community has said, hey, this doesn't look right. They can now start to pull that string from the end and maybe prevent something from becoming an event. And that's the real purpose of a team like Ryan's, is they're looking for those little strings like this shouldn't be here and start pulling down that string to see really how did it get here and so on and so forth. And being a proactive threat hunter is that excitement he's talking about, because you're discovering something new. It's like being like David Caruso in CSI Miami. You're walking in here before the crime scene happens. You're able to prevent the crime, and that's really exhilarating. We could talk a lot about forensics. We could talk a lot about use cases. And again, I brought up the Sony PlayStation Network as one where they didn't completely eradicate. There's so many cases of businesses that go back in operation and they have to shut down hard again because their team or their telemetry, their tools, whatever that's available to them, they don't quite go back far enough, or their backup are compromised too. And that's where you hear in the news, when you look at the top 10 data breaches of all time, you may never know, probably due to PR, HR, legal reasons, whatever the regulations and laws that apply to them, there will be certain things that's released publicly. And I often temper people's expectations of this. Just because a breach said that it affected this many users, a hacker attacker, generally speaking, this doesn't go into a network and go, oh, just give me 100,000 records. They want to dump the whole directory. They want all the information that they're allowed to get as fast as they can get it. But the reason why we see these numbers, like, let's say a credit card provider or middleman got compromised and they're saying, 2 million records were compromised. Well, if Home Depot has 200 million customers a year, more than likely 200 million records were compromised in some way. It's just a matter of what legally they're obligated to report based upon the discovery that had been done, that they're bound to those reports, right? So even then, their teams, well, what they can see is usually what gets reported in the news, if that, per what the laws are for that industry. And so a lot of folks don't understand that, like the OPM, the Office of Personnel Management years ago, had an issue where there's a subcontract company that was processing and transmitting these forms called SF-86s, which is a government form to do a background of your life so you can get a security clearance. Well, a nation state actor, which has been alleged, and I think it's been confirmed since then, had basically got in and exfilled all of these SF-86s. But for months, the OPM office kept reporting the number kept growing because as the forensics teams was doing their due diligence, they said, yeah, we initially see it's only 60,000 records. Then they said it was 90,000 records. And then before you know it, it's like 200,000 records. Well, what people should just accept the fact is that basically they got all the records. So at that point in time, that threat actor had been in that system for months to years, and I don't think it ever got officially disclosed. And so what Ryan's talking about there is sometimes there's a threat actor that's just laying in your network undetectable for weeks to months to even worst case years. And then sometimes they're not the scary axe murderer on your network. I mean, those are what we got signatures for. The signatures are for the big screaming axe murderer, like, I'm here to take your data, and that's easy to detect. Like, hey, we got to take care of that guy. But the ninjas and the actors that move in extreme stealth, that make minor moves, that try to mimic normal network activity. This is why things really matter when you get to basics. I've talked to a lot of folks about the basics of security. Like when you just get to account management, do you need to have an account that's got 24/7 access, or do you need to set account operating window times where that account can log in and log off? That's a basic practice that's built into any kind of, user, directory type system where you're using, Linux or Windows or whatever operating system, enterprise system you're using. They have these things where you can set working hours. And that's a huge, you're reducing the risk of that account. If it did get compromised, it can only compromise during these hours. Usually those are the hours where your security team's on board day shift. You're at 100% capacity to take on any incidents that would happen. But usually these actors, like I mentioned LowSec earlier, LowSec's biggest attack on the internet happened after 5 p.m. Eastern on a Friday because they knew one thing. They knew that the East Coast and all of DC would leave early on a Friday. Usually, a lot of folks try to get out the office early. No one wants to hang out on a Friday night after 5 o'clock looking at something, and they took complete advantage of it. And one of the sites they defaced was USAJobs.gov and a couple other government career sites, and it was just humorous that they targeted a lot of government institutions that particular day. But they're very smart. They think about these things. They think very methodical, and their whole goal is to evade detection. So you could be paying for the top of the line CM tool. You could have signature updates like every day, every hour. At the end of the day, there's still that gap. There's always going to be a gap. And having teams like Ryan's team and other teams in the world that do that proactive threat hunting is so important because what you mentioned earlier at the beginning of this recording, he talked about the collaboration and communication with all kinds of teams around the world that are publishing papers, they're sharing their information, say, hey, I've seen this. Because anyone else, comment about this? And that kind of collaboration is critical because we don't need silos in this particular industry. If everybody's keeping to themselves, because companies don't usually want to air out what they perceive as their dirty laundry. They don't want like, I don't want to show weakness because that's not the nature of being in a cutthroat business, right? But that collaboration is so crucial to get ahead of the bad events that before they can happen. Like stopping the thing before it happens is a beautiful thing because it's like unsung hero work, right? You do this work, you stop something, and then you share it with the rest of the world. They've patched and fixed for it too, and their signatures created. But you don't get medals. You don't get a public. Here's Ryan and his team that just prevented $1 trillion plus of global loss. It's unsung work, right? But they don't do it for the accolades and those things. They do it because it's something they're passionate about. They want to keep networks and organizations secure because if the network and organization is secure, they could keep being in business, they could keep hiring and employing people and improving our economies at small to large scales every day. And that's what it's about, is about having that passion and drive. With that being said, Ryan, a lot of folks, there's a lot of discussion in the past since COVID about burnout and about people just, because a lot of us, particularly people in your realm, and particularly there's their day job. They go home and they work on it at home. Right before they go to sleep, they're still reading those articles. Because it's, like I said, it's a never-ending deluge of information. And I can only imagine that burnout rates in your particular threat hunting and analysis sector of the business suffers probably higher percentages of burnout, more so than executives like CIOs and CSOs do, because you guys, it's in your DNA just about. Could you maybe elaborate a little bit about like what have you witnessed as far as burnouts across your sector, as well as what do you do and what do you encourage your team to do to kind of help mitigate burnout?
So you're first off, you're talking to the right guy for this particular topic. Um, I'll state that you're 100% correct. The blue team typically is what I refer to as like a hands-on security. When I say the blue team, I mean those who are fielding alerts and or incidents or engineering the detections and so on and so forth. But especially, as I mentioned, I worked for 5 years in IR consulting. And incident response consulting, you run hot. So you might be working 60 to 80-hour weeks, and that's what I was doing. And I was also writing my course for SANS. And at the same time, I was also running a security conference. By the way, shout out to Cactus Con in the Arizona, well, Phoenix Mesa, Arizona area. I was actually the project lead for Cactus Con for a handful of years. I had to step away from that. My SANS class was finished, and the last thing I was still in IR consulting. I basically was this close, maybe more like that close, to needing what we call a grippy sock vacation. Like I was at my wit's end. I couldn't think, I couldn't function. I was a husk of a person, and that's the reason I'm in threat hunting now. So I basically burned myself out. There's no basically. I absolutely burned myself out. So when you start to look at it, if you're working for consulting services, or you want to, one of the key things to always ask about, and not just one time, is basically the quality of life and work-life balance, as we call it.
Mhm.
So you want to have a life. You want to maintain your friendships. You want to be able to interact with your family, like a little bit. That'd be cool, right? So people who get into the type of research roles like threat hunters and things like that, they might have it a little different than folks who work in a security operations center. If it is a security operations center that is shift based, which is what I initially did. We had a number of shifts. One big building that was custom designed, not the building, but the one big open room that was custom designed just for us, and with a war room intact and all kinds of fun, amazing things. And we worked our shift, and then we had 2 hours of overlap with the next shift, and then they had 2 hours of overlap with the next shift, and we got to trade, we got to collaborate, got to hand off, and then he just went home. Yay! However, when I moved from the SOC to the CERT, the Computer Incident Response Team, that was a little different. When things go haywire and they go completely wonky, and you're the one who is in charge of the systems being used, you have to maintain them, you have to update them, whatever. Or if you're going to be serving as an incident commander for a case, that case might run, I mean, how many days or how many weeks, how many thousands of hours logged. So it's very, very important for folks to recognize that in this global community that I call just the blue team, we're very prone to burnout.
Yeah.
There are people who overextend themselves just in the jobs that they pick up, and they're not able to meet the general daily requirements of their life.
Yes.
Going without bathing for multiple days in a row. Oh, I don't have time. I don't have time to eat or bathe. Really? Are you sure about that? So, and then there's people like me who overextend ourselves. Oh, I'll have this crazy hectic lifestyle that I love because I'm an adrenaline junkie and I love having a hero complex. I come in to save the day. Yay, Ryan, you're still special. Oh, yeah, but I can't think straight, right? And then also take on other tasks and endeavors. So there's a lot of burnout. You have to find the thin line between just showing up at work, going home, and shutting everything out, because typically a lot of folks who do that are not, they're a little behind the eight ball, so to
Yeah.
say. And then the opposite side of it, where you're literally just constantly researching.
Mhm.
If you find yourself sitting in the evening with your family watching TV, but you're on your phone reading articles that you found during the day, because
Yeah.
you want to make sure you learn those things too, that kind of thing. That's a problem. One
Yeah.
thing that I will say I'm seeing being leveraged very well these days is AI for summarization. And that can be AI for summarization of articles. It can be AI for summarization of heck podcasts. Honestly, you watch the whole thing. Don't use
Yeah.
AI, but you know. But also, it can be summarization of, hey, we're working an incident. We have 1,000 lines in our spreadsheet of doom, or SOD, as a lot of groups call it in the IR community. When you have an activity, you identify what host, what time, what user, what process, all those things are documented. And it used to be a very, very manual process. And these days, AI can do a really good job. Not that
Mhm.
you'd ever outright or implicitly just trust it, but of summarizing a lot of those types of things. So I am seeing a little bit less burnout because of AI coming in and being like, all right, you hold on. Instead of you spending 5 hours going through this, I will do it for you in a little bit less time. But I
Mhm.
think that what people are also doing is they're seeing the power of AI to streamline tasks. And instead of going, oh, cool, I can work a 40 or 45-hour week, they're going, oh, cool, I can do even more in my 80-hour weeks. And they're doing even more in their 80-hour weeks.
Mhm.
So burnout, yeah, I definitely burned myself out. I had to leave IR. I will forever miss IR. I absolutely love running cases.
Yeah.
I don't miss, having my daughter say, "Hey, can you take me to my friend's house?" And me being annoyed that she
Right.
opened my office door. Like, what do you
Yeah.
want? I'm busy. I have got all these things. Like, I'll never miss that.
Yeah.
But we run ourselves into the ground. So understanding what you truly need to do to be effective is you have to maintain you. You
Yeah.
can't walk too far away from that and lose yourself in the environment. So when people tell me I show up to work, I go home, I'm done. Nothing security. Usually my personal reaction to that is, all right, good luck staying up to date,
Yeah.
right? At the same time, there are organizations out there who are giving their people time for research, and that's amazing. And so if you're out there and you're a manager, think of your people's well-being and don't force them to do stuff outside of work just to keep up with what they need to do for their day jobs.
I want to
Anyways,
augment
I'll
that
digress
perspective.
there. Basically, I burned out.
Yeah. So what Ryan was talking about
Well,
being
oh,
on
sorry, I
an
didn't catch
emergency
that.
response team, the perspective gets lost because when people think of us IT guys, they see us, we're sitting in air conditioned offices. Maybe it's the time of day they come and see us in work where maybe we are on a break from the analysis and just staring through lines of code. That maybe we just put up a YouTube video and it might not even be related to work. It could just be checking some sports, trying to do that escapism for just a moment to reset your brain sometimes because sometimes you need to turn off the analytical logical side and tap into some more of the colorful sides of your brain just for a moment. And it could be the wrong moment, and it could be the perception of, well, my ID department, they don't really work that hard, not like I do or this group does, because there's a difference between busy work and like efficient, smarter working is the goal that we try to go for, right? But then they hear about this IT tech burnout, they're like, why is my IT guy burning out? I'm the one that's got all the stress of all the shareholders and this and all this because everybody's in their different bubbles, if you will, of what's important in their world, right? And people forget that cybersecurity and IT operations, we're enablers for the business. We enable the business to breathe and to work out harder and to do more in the world, right? We're the enabler. And the vision that you mentioned about when you start a case and if you don't have those shifts where you could do a handoff to somebody, if you're part of the CERT team, you are it. You're the A team, and every person's busy. You got a firewall analyzer here. You got someone doing reverse malware engineering over here. You have all these rock stars put together, but once they start, they got to work until it's done because maybe the network and operations are being held up until you get it done. And sometimes it's not always just minutes or hours, it can last for days. So, the vision that I want you guys to have when you think about IT and tech burnout, it's not just the whole, okay, they're at work, then they come home and then they do research and work. It's also those teams that have to work until it's done. And it's just like when an incident happens. I mean, I hate to bring up a horrible memory in our history, but 9/11, can you imagine how many fire chiefs and inspectors and managers and workers worked days on end before they finally got a little bit of shut eye because it was all about one more person. Can I try to rescue one more person? Can I try to make a difference today? And these are the people that just go above and beyond what their bodies and minds can handle to do that. So if they happen in real life physical emergencies and physical issues and events that happen, this is the same thing that happens in the cyberspace. It's just to have that, just to connect those dots that when you hear of IT burnout, don't be quick to say, oh, what are the IT guys burning out about? It's real. And it's because they're working just with the same passion that someone does as a fireman or a policeman on a scene of an event or crime. That's exactly what these teams are doing. It's the same, folks. So just make sure you keep that perspective in mind because a lot of executives can quickly dismiss IT burnout. What the hell is that? But they have to make sure they understand it's the same equivalent. You're doing the same hours. You're putting the same stress on your mental state of trying to do some good. And sometimes it is unsung. It's not always rewarded. But it's the work that you do because you care about it. We could definitely talk for hours and hours, Ryan. And I just want to say right now, consider this already. And this is not the end of the recording yet, folks. But I'm just saying, Ryan, anytime you want to come back on this podcast, I love to talk about other facets because what you do is really intriguing. Is very interesting. And I know we could definitely have more conversations. But I do want to kind of talk about what are some upcoming events. I know you do make your rounds to some conferences. You mentioned a conference that you was a part of a founder group before. Is there any news or updates? Is there a new course you're working on, a book, an article you're writing? What is some news for the world of Ryan?
Yes, I am. Well, I'm waiting right now. I'm waiting to hear back from the approval board, the call for papers board for DEF CON. For anyone not familiar, and how dare you if you're not, but the annual, as we call, hacker summer camp. What they call it themselves, the world's largest hacker conference.
I call it the Super Bowl of
I
hacking, but
have
go
done
ahead.
the past. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The past 5 years, I have either led or co-led a workshop at DEF CON. I love putting those on. I love it. It's a lot of work. Oh, they're 4 hours. Well, we do 4 hour ones. So we've had the privilege for 5 years. The team there likes us. We really like them, but I'm not sure if they're like, that's enough. So we'll find out. I might be doing a workshop at DEF CON, but I also have a number of SANS events coming up. The SANS Deeper Summit is the online version is free for anyone to show up, hang out, and have fun with all of us. And I will be running my class, Forensics 528. It's a 4-day hands-on, highly digital forensic focused, by the way, course. If anyone wants to join me there, awesome. Come hang out. I'm also going to be potentially, and I'm hoping, teaching. Well, I'm not sure how wide the audience is actually. I didn't. Do you have folks watching in Japan right now? Are you in Japan?
Good. I just actually did a speaking tour in Japan for a whole month in May. So yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, I'll be running a class in Tokyo in September, I believe it is. And then I also have, I guess I have a couple private runs. But we just wrapped up this past Friday. No, 2 Fridays ago. The May 30th. I'm not sure what time this will eventually air, but May 30th, 2025, the SANS Ransomware Summit. It's virtual only, completely free. Just go register at sans.org. Register for the Ransomware Summit 2025. The videos will be then available, or they'll just be on YouTube pretty soon. So if anyone wants to check out some of the, latest trends and cool stuff in the ransomware environment, realm, scene, etc., check those out. We have previous years there, so you can look up Ransomware Summit 2022, 23, and 24 on YouTube and find our playlists of all the really cool, videos. So it's all free. Just go check it out. It's not monetized or anything.
Well, Ryan, if you do
And
me the favor of sending me all those links, I'll put them in the description, save people the searching and trying to navigate through websites. But what other, do you have any other
cool.
events this year?
I think event-wise, those are the big things that I've got. I want to do my DEF CON. I hope they accept this. The DEF CON workshop, and yeah, yep,
Oh, okay. So we're getting to a part where this is my favorite question I ask all my guests, and so everybody has that day one, right? The day that they made the decision, at whatever age or point they were in life and career, they made the decision that, hey, I want to go into IT cybersecurity. This is what I want to take my career in. So, what is your day one story? Can you share it with us?
So, okay, mine's not a fluffy, everything is sunshine and bunnies and rainbows and happy story. It's actually quite the opposite. But, long story short, I was developing what we used to call a proggy for AOL back in the day, which was a tool that you could run on your system that would provide additional functionality within the America Online landscape. I spent, I think it was over a year and a half maybe, developing it. And the day that I was about to release it, I had done my final share with someone that I had brought in from the community, the Wares community, as we used to call ourselves
Yeah.
back then. And he was going to do a final proof and then be like, boom, release it. And then have all the little, all of us little wannabe hackers, be able to bust into rooms and scroll stupid stuff in chat and, whatever else. And when I got it back from him, unbeknownst to me, it had a virus. And this was actually back, I was a Mac user back then, so I didn't really even think Macs had viruses back then.
Mhm.
And also, I was like 13 or something.
Yeah.
And when I released it, I was releasing it with the fervor of like, oh, I've spent a year and a half on this. I hope everyone likes it. Yay. And everyone who got it quickly, it was just, oh, hey, that guy. I used to go by Surf Kahuna online. They were like, hey, that guy, he's just distributing a virus. No one touch it. And it was beyond heartbreaking. And immediately I was like, okay, well, I need to learn more about viruses and I need to learn more about how the heck that happened and operational security and how I trusted someone I shouldn't have. And you get the additional things that already in that regard, I knew that I wanted to work in the security landscape. So it wasn't a, like, yay story.
Yeah, it was a pretty
But that's
bad
pretty much,
start. But I
Yeah, that's
love
pretty
that
much how it.
experience. It was that experience that helped shape you to become more security conscious, more aware, and more informed. And without that moment, it wouldn't have made you into who you are today, which we need 1,000 times more use in industry, Ryan, because you do great work, you and your team. But what he just talked about was there was a component that he used to compile this program, this app, and the software that was already tainted, that already had bad code instructions, malware, or virus in this case. And his onus about Apple, a lot of people still have this perception. It's weird how reputation can be made and broken in a moment, but Apple's built a long reputation because they're all super proprietary and their code is not open source, that it is not prone to viruses. But let me caution people this. Just because they're not always in the news with a new virus and a new thing, because it's always Microsoft, right? It's Microsoft, Microsoft, Microsoft. But guess what? When there is something that gets proliferated throughout the Apple systems in the world, it's bad. It is really, really, really bad when it is. So when it is, it's bad. Microsoft is almost like every other day there's another, issue with a Microsoft product or tool because they do so much. And there's so much that they do. And so, of course, they're going to be the one with the big target on their back. But with that being said, he was talking about back when he was 13, where he had a component that he was built on that had a virus embedded in it. This recently just happened with Microsoft, with GitHub, and with distributions of certain components. And I know we could talk a whole nother hour about that. But folks, it still happens today. Even with a big company that has excellent code checking programs and teams that work nonstop, like Microsoft, if it can happen to Microsoft, it can happen to anybody. So I just give a little word of caution that the same things that happened to Ryan years ago when he was just beginning to become a teenager at 13, it's still happening today, folks, with big, Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies like Microsoft. So it's never going away. It's always going to be there. Trust but verify. Hashes are your friend when it comes to software. Version control is big when it comes to software, folks. DevSecOps, there's a lot of good there. There's a lot of convolutedness for what some executives will look at it, but it's there for a reason. It's there to protect you. Again, not to keep going down the rabbit holes of talking to tech talk. So my next question is, along your 20 plus years of experience, Ryan, I know that this had to been either leaders, managers, colleagues, coworkers, experts in industry that you looked up to that helped positively impact you and your career. This is a question where I like to give someone an opportunity to shine a light on those individuals that was extremely impactful to you.
So for me, I would not, I would absolutely not be where I am if I didn't just have, whether you want to call it the luck, or the whatever it might be, socializing skills to enable situations. Okay, I think a lot of it was luck. To have people teach me so much, so much. When I first started in a security operations center, I was working with a number of folks, including Kelsey Tietjen, who is over, he works for, I'll just say, a national lab in the United
Hmm.
States, and has for a long time now. And I recall being on the security operations center, fielding my first number of alerts. And within, I think, the second week, he was like, "All right, everyone, go into this room," and we pulled up, in case we looked at a 1.4 megabyte floppy disk image, FAT32 formatted, and he was like, "All right, we're gonna look at the actual file system byte by byte." And yeah, oh, why do you have that?
It's antiques
Just
at this
ready to
point.
go. Oh, you
I don't have the
got two of
record
them ready to
size
go.
one, but I'll find one on eBay eventually.
That's wonderful. But I could tell too many stories, but we're getting probably low on time here.
Yeah.
So Kelsey was great. A fellow named Chris Pavon taught me a lot about what I originally knew in the forensics realm. Andrew Hunt, who I believe is still with that organization, he was amazing. I had just taken Forensics 610, which I now teach. Full circle moment, yeah. And when I took it, there was an appendix by a fellow named Andrew Hunt. And like a week after I finished the class, I was told, "Hey, we're hiring a new malware guy to run our malware team." And I was like, "What's his name?" And they said, "Andrew Hunt." And I said, "Shut up." Like, wait a minute. Danny Quist came in as the next person in our malware to lead our malware team, and I learned a ton from him. We're actually really close buddies. I just had him on a panel on the Ransomware Summit. He lives about a mile that way. We go mountain biking together, lifelong friendship. You're stuck with me, dude, if you're watching this. A number of people there. When I got into consulting, I ended up working with, oh, and Sean Carlson, by the way. I wish I would have gotten more into this, but when you mention like security 101, essentially, especially with ransomware, what we almost always find is that either the initial access or the furtherance, like a big, whoa, what happened here, is because of failure to adhere to what basic security 101 principles. Sean taught me all about security 101 failures and why they're so important. And I have mentioned Sean's name and security 101 and how important ever since. When I got into consulting, Ethan Fleischer and John Wood were two of the directors that I reported to. That was back when I was at BlackBerry Silence, and just absolutely phenomenal to work for them and be guided by them and so on and so forth. It's just there's so many names of people
Of
in the
course.
community. But I will throw out one. This feels a bit random, but I'm gonna throw it out anyway. For anyone wanting to learn more about InfoSec, sure, I'm a SANS guy. I'm a course author and I'm an instructor. I'm going to say go take my class. Duh. But Sam Bone is with the San Francisco or City College of San Francisco, I believe is the proper term. He does multiple workshops and talks and all kinds of things around the world. Samsclass.info is his it catalogs his current and previous college courses. They're all online. They include hands-on labs with files. They include tons of YouTube videos of recording. It's all free. None of it's monetized. Sam just does it out of the kindness of his heart, and I freaking love that guy.
I love that.
But yeah, there's so many people to thank over the years. So I just thought of my initial
Yeah.
foray into this realm
It's a
and the
tough
people that
question.
helped me the
It's
most.
like I just handed you an Oscar and you're on stage going, and you're gonna forget people naturally in that moment.
You're
So
gonna start
again,
playing with me.
thank you
You'll start
for
playing music real quick.
the
You're like, all
music's
right,
playing.
Ryan, get off stage.
So, Ryan, obviously you work at the forefronts of threat hunting and all of the nastiness of the internet, right? So this question is more of a, what is something you fear, and what has been your biggest challenge, whether in the past or maybe something you're taking on right now?
So I fear AI. I absolutely am terrified by AI. I'm also absolutely enamored by AI. I had to do a task that I thought was going to take 4 to 5 hours recently, I think 2 weeks ago, and I wrote a prompt that was like two sentences and fed it a bunch of raw JSON data, and it was and just oh my phenomenal. But yet it scares the heck out of me when you think of weaponization. And I'm not even thinking of like injections or that type of thing, poisoning the model. That's a whole other thing. I'm just talking about threat actors themselves leveraging AI and enabling expedient craziness.
Yes.
There's a company out there recently ran a ransomware simulation that what they were able to essentially the full attack chain, including like developing the prompts and like doing the whole thing in like 22, 23 something minutes. I'm like, oh, fun. That doesn't make all of our jobs more difficult. Like that's crazy. AI is nuts. So I used to think AI was a buzzword. I absolutely no longer think it's a buzzword. And quite honestly, I have no idea what's in store for all of us. And so the more that you can learn about AI and using it to better detect and defend, then probably the better. I jumped on the bandwagon a while back, and I'm not getting off.
No, I definitely
Oh, and the
believe
other
that.
one
Go ahead.
was it what scares me, and what's the other one?
Yeah. And what isn't or intimidates you, scares or intimidates you, whether it's a challenge in the past or a challenge you're currently dealing with?
Oh, I'm horrible with delegation. He says, being a team lead, I'm horrible to. I want to do it. I don't like to. For anyone out there who might be moving into a lead style of position, uh, don't be a Ryan. It's very, very important that you train your folks, and I'm all about that. And also that you learn from your folks, and I'm all about that. But one of the things that I try to not burden them, and so if a request for 10 hunting reports comes in, I figure, well, I'll do five and then I'll give, five to them to spread between them. And then my task list gets longer and longer and longer and longer and longer. And it's the one feedback I've had for myself as a team lead is understanding when you're doing too freaking much, proper prioritization and delegation. And I think that that's my
Trust your
primary,
team.
like, I'm working on that. I have so much trust and faith in my team, and yet oh, I'll keep these so they don't have to do it. No, like not just trust your
But
team,
you're a
but leverage.
service-oriented leader. With that statement, that's what a lot of service-oriented leaders get. When they're serving, they're in service of their team, and you're just saying, you know what? I don't want my team to burn out like I have, and that's kind of like that trauma in your career where you're trying to let them go through what you've went through, and that's a very commendable thing. But it's something you definitely got to work on because you do trust your team, but you also got to trust that they'll let you know when it's too much. Hopefully, so
That
but you've been through it,
just
and so
click
you know
that.
what it's like. So
Like they say on Twitch,
I do
someone
want to
click
ask
that.
one more technical question because it's very important because a lot of folks at this point are going, okay, there's the SANS kill chain. There's a lot of other models of kill chains when it comes to the anatomy of a cyber attack. But there's also like the MITRE ATT&CK framework, and there's other frameworks, but that's probably the one that's got a lot of love in the past few years because they put together the TTPs and it gives people a little bit of a perspective insight on how these things can get into your network and move across the network. And not only that, there's also John Baker who leads the MITRE Center for Threat Informed Defense, who's trying to corral the community into sharing information and sharing a little bit. And folks in the industry may have different opinions of MITRE, but for the most part, they put out these things. They are free for the public and anyone to look about that. So from your perspective, being aligned with SANS and so forth, do you see this as different methodologies or different perspectives, or do you see that they have a lot of common ground, but they all are trying to do the same thing? What is your thoughts on like the MITRE ATT&CK framework as well as the Center for the CTID, and then the work that you do and the SANS and other great organizations do?
I think whether they intended directly to do it, and I do believe that they did, MITRE has essentially brought together all the various vendors and researchers and put them into a unification where if you're a vendor and you're not mapping your detections to MITRE detections, good luck. Good luck with sales, good luck with marketing, good luck with all that. They've put themselves at prime positioning. Well done, Miter. I at first was there were some things with the MITRE ATT&CK framework where they were changing numbers here and there, but they haven't done that in a long time. Overall, my point being is that I don't think that there's any better way to train yourself out there than using two resources. One of them is just going to the MITRE ATT&CK framework, going to the, if you're a Windows shop, going to the Windows Enterprise Matrix, starting at the top left-hand side, click the first one. What are the tactics that are listed, or excuse me, the techniques that are listed underneath that particular tactic? Click the first one. What examples do they give? What articles do they reference, etc. And research and use the links they provide, and then go to the next one and the next one. I mean, that's months of that's months of work right
Yeah.
there. I think it's phenomenal. And I think that it is very easy, however, because it's become so popular that some people become a little narrow focused and they're only focused on, okay, well, let's write detections, for example. Let's use the MITRE framework specifically. So mapping to MITRE and being very cognizant, they didn't put that entire system and all those various matrices. There's multiple, right? Not just Windows Enterprise. They didn't put those together like, this sounds good. Like they didn't do that, right? They did a ton. And I know some of the folks who worked on that team to make that happen.
Yeah.
And they're there for a reason. And I highly recommend that folks are familiar with it and that you can speak to it and that you're familiar with it. I don't care if you don't memorize the MITRE technique names, the numbers. I don't have them all memorized. Get out of here. I probably couldn't name like three right now, and I use them
Yeah.
every day, all day, you know? But yeah, I think that they've done a really good job of bringing visibility into a lot of things that other people may not have known about. And they're adapting and they're evolving. So, like, they recently added what we in the industry called click fix. They involved, added a number of techniques for click fix. And I was super excited to see that because it is classic alarm going off during a podcast. It's a very novel technique and it was not directly addressed. And now it is. So I really like it.
Thank you for that. So that ends our technical discussion because I know we're going over time here, but we've just had such an interesting and invigorating conversation here. I want to go into another question that's not technical. This is a moment where I call it my moment of levity. So it's just a couple rapid fire questions, no right or wrong answer. So if you'll humor me, Ryan, I'm just going to hit you. First answer comes to mind. All right. So we're going to start off with cake or pie.
Pie.
What kind of pie?
French silk pie.
French silk pie. Hot or cold French silk pie? I would only assume cold.
Cold. Yeah.
Okay. This splits the room, Ryan. So you're going to divide the room in your next training class potentially. Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Trek.
Star Trek. Oh, which generation or cast crew of Star Trek do you
The
prefer?
first.
The first OG.
The first.
Okay, the Shatner. Okay.
Yeah, well, first and second. I love Picard too. I mean, you can't not love
Okay,
that guy.
Picard, right?
So
All right. Is a hot dog a sandwich?
no,
No. Definitive answer right there. What has been your most favorite book of all time, and what was the last book you've read?
both are easy. The I'm gonna give you a series. Robert
Okay.
Jordan's The Wheel of Time
Classic.
because of all the reasons.
Yes.
14 primary books, additional, there's a prequel, and they average 820 something pages a piece.
They're
Robert Jordan
monsters.
passed
Yeah.
away before he could finish the series, and Brandon Sanderson came and took over. I prefer these days to read nonfiction. Much more prefer to read nonfiction. But when I was in my fiction phase, nothing was better than the Wheel of Time series. Phenomenal, just
Yes.
phenomenal. They even made a TV show recently
Yeah, Amazon Prime.
yeah, on Amazon Prime. Thank you. And the most recent book is it's about what the full name. I actually have it up on my Amazon screen now. It's about John Boyd. It's Boyd, the fighter pilot who changed the art of war by Robert Coram. So first off, I'm not done with it. I'm about
Okay.
75% done with it. But John Boyd, the things that he did, the ideas he came up with, his whole the energy maneuverability theory that he developed, essentially made him the grandfather of the F-15 and the F-16. He invented the OODA loop, and if you work in threat hunting or even go through SANS classes now, we've replaced pickerel with
Mhm.
an OODA loop, with the DARE process, the dynamic IR process. Anyways, John Boyd, phenomenal. From a coworker of mine, Paul. If you watch this, thanks for the recommendation. He's like, you should read this book, and I'm like, about a fighter pilot, and then he goes, he's the OODA loop guy, and I was like, sold, and it's
So,
phenomenal.
well, if you give me those links to all those books, I'll put them in the description below, and I really appreciate that. Last few questions here. A lot of us with our busy day jobs, there are still nonprofits, volunteer charities, work whether we give of our time, our energy, or our money. Is there any projects that speak to you and that are doing great in the world that you would like to shine a light on? And of course, provide me the link to them so I can put them in the description below.
There are a number of them. The one I'd like to mention first does now offer a multitude of paid services, but they still generate a lot of free content on a volunteer basis, and that is the Defer Report. If folks are not familiar with the deferreport.com, it's a group of volunteers who have set up a number of honey nets and with honeypots, duh. And they basically let threat actors come into the environment and do all their silly shenanigans. And then they run full scoped deep dive incident response on all of that. And they write these very, very detailed articles. When people ask me, hey, if I ever want to work as a threat hunter or work in incident response, where's the best place I can go to see exactly the type of things I'll see in the field? Deferreport.com. Just go read all the free articles. They're freaking amazing. I love them. I absolutely love them. I had them actually, two of them, Pete and Angelo, do the keynote for our ransomware summit that we just had at the end of May because they're the only people that have spoken all 4 years. And as we were approaching the fourth year, I was like, why don't they just have them do it? Like,
Yeah.
duh. Just I love that overall team. Yes, they do have paid services, which by the way are awesome. That they offer now Intel and other things that go even further. But the articles, I mean, they're lengthy, super detailed, just amazing training resources. I love those folks.
Awesome. Um, we already kind of talked about what's coming up next for you. You got some events lined up, which if you have any links to those events, we'll put them in the description below. We reach a point where we're way over time. So I really appreciate you and your time that you've given us on this podcast today. You've offered so much information and insight. And again, open invitation to come back on the podcast at any time. I'd love to have you a guest again in a future season. With that being said, I give all of my guests the last word. So the floor is yours to speak on whatever you like to speak on, or advice, guidance, or just you want to get on a soapbox. This is your moment.
I don't think I would be, I know I would not be where I am. Also, if I didn't learn to appreciate that I don't know everything. Young Ryan back in high school, which was a while ago, by the way, really thought that he knew everything. I can program calculators and write assembly language, and I helped tutor the A students because I wasn't an A student my senior year at the very least. I was busy doing other stuff. And it was not very long. It was not very long after I got into my first, hands-on blue team, my SOC job, where I immediately realized, whoa, I just went to college for 7 years. I got a master's degree. I had a 4.0 the whole time. Aren't I special? I know so much. A couple days in that job, and I was like, whoa, I don't know anything. I don't know anything. So communication, and not necessarily socializing per se, but I've always been called a social butterfly growing up, and I think that that has absolutely lent to becoming having the career that I have and having the contacts that I have, reaching out to people. If someone, hey, we did a bunch of layoffs at work. I've been doing this work for, X number of months or whatever. Can anyone share my profile out? It doesn't hurt you to take that profile, throw it in a couple circles, throw it on your LinkedIn, hit them up and, just get to know them for 5 minutes. And, like the relationships that you build are what will get you through. I've basically landed or initially got into my last. I've had four. I stayed with the companies for a long time, so four major jobs in my career, all of which I got initially through someone that I knew and who let me know about it, and that's how I got my foot in the door. So not only that, but I work in Intel, so it's all about like, what are you working on? Well, what are you working on? Well, here's what I'm working on. Like, does that help at all? No, that sucks. All right, well, your stuff's cool. Can I learn more about that? And working with people, reaching out to people, and just building your networks. Of course, folks in security have always been seen generally as, got the hoodie over our head, don't want to talk to people. And like, I'm in a dark room and all that. And I'm in a dark room right now with black lights on, nerd. But whatever. But you get the idea. So yeah, thanks for having me on. I hope that whatever randomness spouted forth from my mouth through the past hour and 15 minutes or whatever is useful to some folks and just maybe entices some folks to get more involved. Join Slack groups, join Discord groups. If you're interested in digital forensics, join. It's literally just called the Digital Forensics Discord. There's thousands of people in there. You can ask all kinds of questions. You can help other people. Join those communities, get to know people, go to conferences. Sure, go to talks. I give talks and workshops. I love to have people there. Otherwise, it'd be stupid talking to myself. But also take advantage of what we call line con and just getting to know people. If you see someone on a laptop, they have a terminal screen up and they look like they're interested, like, hey, what are you doing? Like, oh, what are you up to right now? Like, what do you do? It's really what I think everyone should be doing in order to get ahead in this space.
Wonderfully said. And I think the only thing I'm going to add is that no matter how much we have emerging technologies and we deal with IT and all these operations and technical stuff every day, it all comes back down to the human element. And so, Ryan, thank you and your team for the great work you do day to day. And I definitely appreciate your time on the podcast today. Thank you.